What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of BMGBG. I'll be your host, Bison.
And I'll be your co-host, Ben.
And today we're going to talk about the top 20 free agents in the NFL right now. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe and go check out the TikTok, BMGPG.
That's right, Bryson. So we are going to take a look, see who's still available. It's been a crazy, few days here in the NFL free agency. A lot of players off the board, and it's getting down to the slim pickings already. And we're just a few days into the free agency. So how are you feeling with everything, Bryson?
Yeah, the Packers aren't getting anybody good right now.
Yeah, it's from a Packers standpoint, right? It's been, a little disappointing. In all honesty, I don't know what we were expecting coming into it, right? Typically, Green Bay doesn't make a huge splash. We don't go after those big.
Last year we did.
You're right. I take that back. Xavier McKinney was a pretty big signing. Josh Jacobs also a pretty big signing for us last season. But typically, you don't see that out of Green Bay, and last year was a little bit different than this year, right? So last year, we were going into year 2 of the Jordan Love experiment, right? So you didn't really truly know what you had yet. I think he's solidified a spot as one of the great quarterbacks in the league at this moment, right? So I think going into year 3 with Jordan Love, this team's ready to compete, right? It's great having that title, youngest team in the league. But at some point, Bryson, you got to bring in some veteran players, get that veteran presence in the locker room. Because as you saw, our young team last year, and I'm sure you picked up on it too, Bryson, kind of towards the end of the season there, things didn't seem to click very well, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We weren't moving the ball down the field very well. Drives just continued time after time to stall out. And it was frustrating. You had players, disappear, like a Jaden Reed. Where was he the last several games, the back half of the season? That's where I think having a veteran in the locker room at certain positions, key positions, right? Like a wide receiver. You're talking about defensive line, cornerbacks, having those veteran presence in there. I think that's what helps with these younger guys. I think, I hate to say we're asking too much of them at such an early stage in their career, but, this team, they're good. Green Bay has a great team. They're ready to compete, but they're missing a few pieces. And, I truly think they're missing that veteran presence, that veteran leadership in the locker room and on the field. So I think my hopes were a little bit high this offseason that we would go out and address some of these positions, especially at wide receiver, right? Every one of our wide receivers is young. And we're missing Christian Watson. He got hurt. He's going to be out the first 12 weeks. So I really thought we would go out this offseason, address that, bring in a veteran presence, and maybe we still will. But the players that I thought made a ton of sense are already off the board. You look at Davante Adams, made a ton of sense. And maybe he didn't even look at Green Bay, truly, right? Maybe he wanted to go back home, out to the West Coast, out to California, and Green Bay wasn't even a thought in his decision-making, right?
Too bad Davante just got hit by some floods.
Yeah. The weather out there is pretty wild. So that's kind of my thoughts on this offseason. I'm a little bit disappointed so far. I was really hoping, we'd bring in a veteran presence at some of these positions. We haven't done it. A little confused at cornerback as well too. I know we brought in Hobbs. We're paying him a little bit of money. But if we're moving on from Jaire Alexander, which by the way, I hope we don't at this point, because there is nobody available that we're going to be able to replace him with. There's nobody available that you can plug and play in at cornerback 1. So if we do move on from Alexander, we're really going to be struggling in that secondary. Alexander, when he's on the field, he really makes everyone around him better. And that includes our safeties, McKinney as well. So at this point, I hope, they can kind of come to some sort of reconciliation between him and the team and him to get him back in the green and gold next season, because we're going to need him, right? We didn't address that much. Hobbs, good signing, adds depth, not a cornerback 1. So we need to make things right with Alexander, get him back in the room, and see if we can get him back out on the field for us next season. right? So with that, Bryson, I want to digress a little bit. Let's take a look here. I'll run through a list here of what's available. We'll go through about 20 or so top 20 wide receivers, regardless, not wide receivers, but top 20 free agents available, regardless of position. And we'll see who's out there. Maybe they're a good fit for your team. We'll talk about, see if they're a good fit for Green Bay. But we'll start at the top here. Wide receiver, Amari Cooper, Bryson. So initial thoughts on him.
Yeah, he's okay.
Yeah, he's an okay guy, right? So
He's getting to the older side.
he is. He's 30 years old, and he's 6'1", so he's not that, huge body, huge presence that you would throw on the outside, right? Especially with his age. He's 30 years old, but he's coming off a season where he graded out at a 68.3, receiving grade of a 69. He had 44 receptions.
He didn't really have a quarterback the whole season.
Cooper?
Yeah.
He was on the Bills last season.
Well, he was on the Browns for part of the season.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you're not wrong there. But he ended the season 44 catches, 547 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So, as you mentioned, not great. He, given his situation there in Cleveland with Watson going down, and then you got old finger-licking Jameis Winston coming in. And, Winston's not a bad quarterback. He's always had a knack for throwing some interceptions, but boy, can he put up some numbers in the passing game as well.
Yeah.
So, but, Cooper had a disappointing season. Only 547 yards and 4 touchdowns on 44 catches. So, not great. But, that's what you have left out here in this free agency, guys like that. So, would he make a good addition to our receiver room? Possibly. Again, he's not going to step in. He's not going to be that number one that, leader that you're looking for such a young wide receiver group. I guess that's my thoughts on it. Next guy on the list here, a guy that I, absolutely would not want in our locker room, right? I think he's a cancer in the locker room and just not a great teammate. Stefon Diggs is still out there, still available. I know he went down kind of early in the season with an injury. He did grade out at a 79 last year, 47 catches, 496 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Receiving grade 79.7. So, slightly above average last season. Again, he did suffer that injury, and he's another guy, Bryson, that's aging. So he's 31. But picture this, Bryson. How Diggs and Alexander have that beef. Every time we play, there's some kind of altercation pregame out on the field between these two. Picture him coming to Green Bay and us bringing Alexander back. How would that dynamic work out?
I don't really know.
That would be an interesting one, right? That would, especially you're talking all the off-season camps and the OTAs, and it would make things interesting between the two. But I don't see that one happening, and I wouldn't push for that one either. I don't think Stefon Diggs would be a good fit in Green Bay at all. Here's an interesting one for you, Bryson, and you're familiar with him, Rasul Douglas, cornerback.
Yeah.
So he came from Green Bay. We know him well. We picked him up off the practice squad. I believe it was from Arizona several years ago. Really a gem we found there, and the practice squad came in right away. He played excellent for us. He is 29 years old now. Cornerback. He graded out at a 59.2 last season. His coverage grade was a 58.9. Did allow 40 catches on the season, no picks. So he had a down year from what he had previous with Buffalo there. What are your thoughts on Rasul? Possibly. But, with the signing with Hobbs, we probably don't need to bring in another, especially an aging guy like him, right? We wouldn't need to bring another guy like that in. I think he probably address it from here on out through the draft, because I don't think there's anybody, top tier that you would want to throw money at in free agency at this point at that position. Are you kind of thinking along the same lines there?
Yeah.
And then you have offensive tackle. I don't think we'll address our especially our tackle positions. We're pretty set there. But Cam Robinson's available at tackle. And then you have a guard, Tevin Jenkins is available. And then you have a couple cornerbacks here. So the first one is Kendra Fuller here. So he's coming off the season, Bryson, where he graded out at a 66.2 and a coverage grade of 62.4. Again, it's slim picking. He's 30 years old. Probably wouldn't make a ton of sense for us at this point, especially after bringing Hobbs in, who's already, in my mind, he's a project guy. As we mentioned in our last episode, Bryson, younger guy, had a great rookie season, and just you really saw regression over the next few seasons with him. So, in my mind, he's more of a project guy. We don't really need another aging cornerback. Again, I think you address that in the draft at this point. So after him, got Asante Samuel Jr. So another cornerback, 25 years old, graded out of 50.
I don't even know who he is.
Yeah, so he played for the Chargers last season. So you're not going to like his grades. He graded out a 59.3, and his coverage grade was not good either. In coverage, he graded out at a 58.6. No picks last year, and allowed 12 receptions. So not great for him last season. And then let's kind of move on down the list here. A guy, kind of breaking news from the Rams today, by the way. Cooper Kupp was released by the Rams today. So he is now a free agent, eligible to sign with any team. He is, an older receiver, 31 years old. He's 6'2", 208. For him, I know he's dealt with some injuries, but for him, it's a little bit of a down season, but he's still graded out at a 71.2 receiving grade. He had a 72.1 on the season, 6 touchdowns, 710 yards on 67 catches. I think Cooper Kupp, if he can stay healthy, I like him a lot, right? He would make a ton of sense to bring into Green Bay. He's, that veteran wide receiver.
Yeah.
He's reliable. When he's healthy, he's reliable. And I think Jordan Love's missing that guy right now. So, if we could bring Kupp in and, keep him out on the field, keep him healthy, I like that signing.
I don't know why the Rams didn't keep him.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's probably because of the cap room, right? He was making a ton of money in L.A.
He's the reason they won the Super Bowl a couple years ago.
Yeah, he was Super Bowl MVP, if I remember right. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he's 31, but I still think he's got some left in the tank. He certainly can, provide at that position for us, I think. And it would be, again, he would bring that veteran presence, and if you can keep him out on the field, he's reliable. We don't have that right now. At times, we do have that. At times, I think Romeo Doubs, right? Sometimes, especially towards the beginning of the season, Jayden Reed looked fantastic. I really thought he took that next step this past season. I thought he solidified himself as a number one wide receiver. And then I don't know what happened that second half of the year. Just kind of disappeared. I mean, here and there he would pop up, but there would be games where he'd have no catches, no receiving yards. Really just kind of took himself out of the picture. So I think we just need that guy that can provide that.
One game he got suspended, I believe.
You're thinking Romeo Doubs.
Yeah.
Yep, Romeo Doubs did. Yep, he did. And that one's a little murky too. I don't quite know what happened with that one. They kept that one pretty close to the vest. I know he wasn't showing up to practice. Maybe he was a little bit upset about the targets he was receiving. I don't exactly know what played into that one. We probably will never know, but a little bit confusing there. But again, it's a young receiving core. We missed out on Devontae Adams. We missed out on DK Metcalf. You're not going to get Higgins. I would bring in Kupp. I would, if the deal's right. I wouldn't want to spend a whole lot of money on him, given his past injury history and his age.
I wouldn't mind Jayden Higgins.
Yeah, I would love Jayden Higgins from Iowa State. I still think you can bring in a guy like Kupp and still address that in the draft, bring in a wide receiver. And Higgins, you can probably pull in the second round, right?
Yeah.
I like Higgins a lot out of Iowa State. 6'4", I think he's 215, 220 pounds. We watched, some tape on him a little bit, Bryson. He's great at high pointing the ball. He knows how to use his size with those contested catches. I like Higgins a lot, and I would love to pull him in the second round if possible. We may have to move up or kind of do some swapping there in the second round to grab him, but I would love to add Higgins in the second round, absolutely. So outside of Cooper Kupp, you got cornerback Mike Hilton. Again, you're not gonna see he had an okay season. I'll give him that. So he had an overall grade of 75.9. His coverage grade, not so great, 68.5. He is 31 years old, had one interception on the season. So
he is always decent.
Yep, decent. Again, we have some decent cornerbacks right now, right? We don't have great ones. We do when Alexander's healthy and out on the field and with us, right? So, but right now we don't. It's a big question mark around Alexander. I want him back. I think we need to bring him back because we're not going to replace his level of talent at this point, right? So Mike Hilton, possibly, if you do move on from Jair, I think you probably need to bring in what you can. Mike Hilton would make sense in that aspect because he is pretty consistent. Outside of Mike Hilton, what you have left in free agency is tackle Tyron Smith. This one's interesting too, Bryson. Quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. What's he do?
Oh.
Pittsburgh's spending a lot of money this offseason. Are they gearing up to make a run? Does he go to Pittsburgh?
Maybe. That's an interesting one.
It is. And they got a couple wide receivers there too, big-bodied wide receivers too, especially
DK
with
Metcalf.
Yeah. So that would, to me, that's an interesting one. Pittsburgh spending some money. Maybe there's plans to bring in Rodgers. Another team that would make sense to me, that seems kind of like an outsider at this point, is Minnesota, right? Sam Darnold moved on. I don't think they're going to want to start the rookie quarterback right away, especially after coming off of a season-ending injury the year prior. So in my mind, he's still a rookie going into the season just because he doesn't have any on-field experience. So Minnesota would make sense. And I like Aaron Rodgers, right? Is he the Aaron Rodgers of 2020? No, not at this point. He's not, right? Is he still a great quarterback? Is he still one of the best 32 quarterbacks in the league? Yeah, absolutely he is. So he's going to find a home. If he wants to play, he's going to find a home. Maybe it's Pittsburgh. Maybe it's the Giants. That one might be a little bit of a stretch. I don't know if Rodgers would go for that one. But maybe it's Minnesota. So we'll see. And then outside of Rodgers, Bryson, you have Mekhi Becton, a guard. You got wide receiver Keenan Allen. So he's an interesting one as well. He would definitely be a veteran guy. He's 32 years old, 6'2", 211. Didn't have a great season, but again, he was playing with a rookie quarterback there in Chicago. Quarterback, I'm not a big believer in Caleb Williams. I don't think he's that great. But Keenan Allen graded out at 64.4, had 744 yards on 70 catches and 7 touchdowns. So pretty decent year for Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
Not bad. So, I mean, he'd be a veteran guy, but, if we had our pick of the litter between him and Cooper Kupp, I'd probably go with Cooper Kupp, just because I think Kupp's upside's a lot more than what Keenan Allen's is. That's just kind of my thoughts on it. And then another quarterback that doesn't have a home yet, Russell Wilson. Where do you think he ends up?
Maybe Minnesota.
Do you think so? That would be interesting. That one would be interesting.
Yeah.
I never thought, maybe the Russ can cook up in Minnesota. Possibly. I could see that. That would be an interesting take. Another guy that's out there is another defensive end. Past his prime, for sure. Is he a guy you could add into the rotation? Maybe. So Von Miller is still available out there.
Oh.
So he's 6'3", 250, but he is 36 years old. Defensive end. So he graded out last season 82.4.
Is he the oldest player in the NFL?
No, I think Rodgers. If Rodgers comes back, I think it would probably be Rodgers. But you look at their positions, the quarterback's a lot less physical than what an edge rusher in the NFL would have to be, right? Um, 36-year-old edge rusher. He did grade out at an 82.4, had a pass rush graded an 83 last season. He had 6 sacks and 2 assists. So, I mean, he still has some left in the tank. Looking at this, 36, barreling down to 37. Probably at this point, he's probably a guy that would be a rotational guy. So maybe he's a guy you would add to rotate in there with Gary and Van Ness, possibly. So that would be an interesting one. I don't see Green Bay doing that, but possibly.
Yeah.
So outside of him, so you got another edge rusher that we'll see what happens with him. There's no way he would come back to Green Bay. Za'Darius Smith. So this guy's a head case, right? This guy, he's an interesting character. So the Lions released him, but he's 6'4", 275. He's 32 years old. He graded out at 74.4 last year with a pass rush grade of 76.5. He did have 10 sacks on the season and 20 solo tackles. So, I mean, he's still got some left in the tank. Will he come back to Green Bay? Probably not. That door's probably shut. I could see him. Well, he's already made a run with Minnesota. I could see him making a run with Chicago, right? That way he could have his revenge tour on all the NFC North that way. So possibly. I don't know where he would end up. Maybe Chicago. But he'll wind up on somebody's roster for next season. But so that'll be an interesting one.
He always seems to go to a different team every year.
It does. I mean, issues tend to follow that guy, right? So we'll see where he ends up, but he always plays with a chip on his shoulder against his former teams, that's for sure. So another edge rusher, Azeez. You got Ojulari is available. You got a defensive lineman, Calais Campbell, who is available. And Green Bay's, Slayton's gone officially, so Green Bay's going to have to find that big body, that run stopper up the middle. Calais Campbell, maybe. I mean, he had a good season. He's old, though. Calais Campbell's is old. So we're talking about, we went from 36 years old to Von Miller. Can you guess how old Calais Campbell is?
37.
No, but he's 6'8", 282. He's 38 years old.
Oh.
But he had a good season last year, so he graded out an 82.3. His run defensive grade was an 85.9. He had 5 sacks and 10 assists this past season. So he had a pretty decent season when you take into factor his age. But he had a decent season. Certainly is a run stopper. Maybe he's got a year left in the tank. Maybe he's the guy you could bring in there as a rotational guy for rundowns, possibly.
Yeah.
So he would be an option. Let's take a look here, see what else we have on the list outside of him. So you got Brandon Sheriff, a guard, is available. He's 33 years old out there. And outside of Sheriff, you got running back J.K. Dobbins, edge rusher Dante Fowler, safety Juan Thornhill, cornerback Stephon Gilmore. So that's an interesting as well. So Gilmore is, he's getting up there in age, especially at that position. He's 34 years old. He graded out as 63.9, coverage grade 60.4. He had 1 interception on the season. So that would be an interesting one. Again, you're going to have to add depth at that position if you're Green Bay. Especially if you move on from Alexander, right? If you bring back Alexander, fantastic. I think we're pretty solid in the secondary if you can bring Alexander back. If not, you're going to have to draft early at that position if you're Green Bay. We're going to need a cornerback. We're going to need a stud in there. So we'll see what happens. Green Bay certainly got some holes to fill. If you're a fan of any of the 32 NFL teams, let us know who you think on that list is worthy of signing, a guy that could step in and be a difference maker for your team. This point, as we mentioned, it's getting slim picking out there in free agency. We're barreling down to the draft here in April, so we'll get ready for that. And Bryson, we'll go through some more mock drafts as we get closer to the draft here. Finish making our way through the 32 teams on that 4-round mock draft as well.
And as always,
it's Go Pack Go.